Chapter 1. Scattered Broken. Darkness reeked of blood and bile. The shallow breaths of dying rat-men filled the shattered burrow like steam rising off corpses. Skritch Vilefang awoke, half-buried beneath mangled flesh and splintered bone, his ears ringing with the echo of collapse. For a moment, he could not move. A heavy body lay across his chest, limp and twitching, its fur matted with soot and globs of green-tinted gore. The air tasted of warpstone ash and burnt fur. The stench made him gag, sharp, acrid, alive with decay. He shoved the carcass aside with a rasping snarl. The body flopped over with a wet crunch, revealing the glassy stare of Snickle Gnaw, his second in command, or at least what was left of him. His lower jaw hung by a strand of sinew, teeth scattered like seeds on the tunnel floor. One eye had been clawed out. His throat looked like it had been gnawed by something far too large to be Skaven. Dead, useless, waste flesh, Skritch hissed, rising to his haunches. Pain rippled down his left arm, where cracked bone jutted through bloodied fur. The limb was already swelling, discoloring to a sickly greenish hue. Warpstone poisoning. Again. He staggered to his feet, gripping the haft of his halberd, the warpfang, like a crutch. Its blade was chipped, caked in blood. Not all of it was his. He turned, eyes gleaming in the dark as he took in the carnage of the failed surface raid. They had charged out into the border princes under the howl of a red moon, seeking plunder, meat, and warpstone. They had found black-powdered death and steel instead. Human mercenaries. Dwarfen cannon fire. The above world had bitten them hard, and the Skaven had scattered like fleas in flame. Skritch's carefully planned ambush had turned into a blood-soaked rout. Now, deep in the veins of the Under-Empire, only ruin remained. A flicker of movement caught his eye. Skritch spun, tail lashing. Something shifted beneath the rubble. A faint, wet gasp. "Speak off if breath remains," Skritch snarled, raising his weapon. A weak voice rasped, "Itch, Skritch Lord, alive, yes." It was Scabber, the runtish tunnel scout, his leg crushed beneath a fallen beam. His face was a mass of bruises, one arm flayed to the bone. But he was breathing. "Scrabbathing lives, useful maybe," Skritch growled. He heaved the beam aside with a grunt, pain lancing up his warped arm. Scabber shrieked as bones shifted, but the rackling clawed forward like a worm, gasping praise. "You lead, yes, Horned One still favors. We return, haim, rebuild, kill-slay them all," Skritch sneered. "Home is far, fool whelp. Many foes between. We are few, clanless, crippled." He paused. His ears twitched. The shadows were wrong. The walls pulsed with something not stone, not flesh. The very tunnels seemed to breathe, a deep, almost inaudible whispering beneath the silence, like thousands of clawed feet scraping just beyond hearing. Then came the sound, a skittering, wet and fast. Move. Skritch shrieked, just as a mass of writhing black fur burst from a side crevice. Tunnel leeches. Warp-mutated, rat-sized things with gaping, toothed maws and skin like blistered leather. A swarm of them poured out like pus from a rotting wound, clinging to walls and ceiling, hungry and blind. Scrabber screamed as one latched onto his throat. It pulsed and squirmed, bloating with blood as he thrashed. Skritch swung the warfang in a savage arc, cleaving two leeches clean in half. Black ichor sprayed the wall, hissing where it touched stone. More came. A dozen. He fought like a frenzied god thing, his halberd spinning, tail lashing, teeth bared. The blade bit flesh again and again, and he stomped one leech underfoot with a sickening crunch. Scabber writhed nearby, still covered in them, until a sharp crack split the air. His body went stiff, then limp. Skritch didn't pause. He ran. The tunnel narrowed ahead into a cracked maintenance shaft, slick with moss and old blood. He shoved his way into the crevice, claws scrambling for purchase, the sounds of feeding echoing behind him. The swarm tore at Scabber's remains, squelching and tearing. Skritch did not look back. He slid down into the darkness, scraping fur and skin, tail trailing behind like a lifeline severed. Silence followed. After what felt like hours, Skritch collapsed in a pocket of dry earth and cracked tile. An old Skaven outpost long since abandoned. Dusty bones marked the floor in gnawed heaps. Strange glyphs scratched into the walls pulsed faintly in the dark. He sat there, panting, bleeding, one arm shaking. He was alone, but not for long. The walls whispered. "Skritch? Come, come, claw lord, deeper, down, down." He froze, ears twitching, hackles raised. The voice was not Scabber's, not any Skaven he knew. It was in his mind, in the stone, deep and low, like earth grinding against bone. Chosen, yes, yes, you climb, crawl, become more, become great, become Verminlord. Skritch's lip curled into a sneer, or was it a smile? "I hear you, yes, yes, I go." And in the dark, something chuckled. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Wall Stone. The dark had a voice. It muttered and moaned through the ancient warrens like the breath of a dying god, slithering through every crack and tunnel. To most, it was only the sound of wind or the settling groan of long-abandoned stone. But to Skritch Vilefang, it spoke in the language of destiny. He stood hunched in the doorway of the forgotten chamber, his warped halberd resting against his shoulder, the sharpened end twitching like a nervous limb. The chamber stank of long-dead filth. Bones chewed clean, moss-slick walls covered in spore growths that pulsed with an unnatural light, like lanterns filled with rotting breath. The glyphs, etched into the rock, still pulsed faintly, casting pale green illumination across the cracked tiles. His left arm itched badly. The swelling had worsened. The veins glowed faintly beneath the fur, black-green lightning threading across discolored skin. His claws had lengthened overnight, and he'd begun to feel them twitch and flex even when still. He no longer needed to move them. They moved of their own accord. Gift, he muttered to himself, dragging his claw down the wall, etching new runes over the old ones. Blessed changed. Not curse. No. Never. Behind him, the remains of a dead Skaven hung from rusted spikes, one of the long-forgotten builders of this cursed place. The bones were dry, but something had split the skull from within. Its jaw hung loose, teeth cracked, eye sockets wide with hollow horror. Skritch didn't know why he stared at it so long. He did not fear death, no. But he recognized this death. It felt familiar, prophetic. The voice returned, seething in the silence. Down, down. Claw lord. The paths writhe, but the route leads true. Skritch blinked rapidly, his eyes flickering in different directions. "Who speaks?" "Speaks," he whispered. "Seer ghost? Horned one? Show?" There was no reply, only the sensation of presence, something vast and buried, something old and watching. The wall to his right cracked, hairline fractures spreading like veins. A single shard fell, clinking against the floor. Behind it, not stone but flesh, warped, pulsing muscle, as if the tunnel itself had grown a skin. Skritch hissed and stepped back. Then it moved. The wall convulsed, like something breathing slowly, deeply. From its depths came a whisper, not through the air, but directly into his skull. You fall crawl but climb soon, pain first, test trial, then rise. The wall burst. A slick tendril of warp-mutated flesh lashed outward, striking the ground where Skritch had stood moments before. Stone cracked like dry bone. The thing unfurled, a fusion of muscle and vermin, half spawn, half ghost. A rattling creature stretched beyond reason, its eyes weeping wharf pus, its mouth stitched shut with rune wire. It made no sound as it moved. It simply lunged. Skritch screamed, not in fear, but fury. The Warfang shrieked as it met flesh, slicing through the beast's tongue-like appendage. Green ichor erupted, hissing wherever it landed, melting grooves in the stone. The creature buckled, but did not fall. It surged forward, faster than a rat ogre, tentacles lashing out. One caught his leg. Pain tore through him as barbs pierced flesh and muscle. He fell hard, dragged toward the gaping, stitched maw. It did not want to kill him. It wanted to swallow him whole, make him part of the wall. No, Skritch lives, Skritch rises. He drove his warped claw into the tendril, raking upward with brute force. The flesh split like rotten fruit, and the beast let go, thrashing. He rolled beneath it, howling, and drove the Warpfang straight into its gut. The blade sank deep, quivering with warp energy. The thing convulsed, limbs spasming, vomit-colored fluid spraying in all directions. It let out a sound then, not a scream, but a sobbing hiss, like 1,000 dying rattlings mewling from a shared throat. Skritch twisted the blade and yanked. The creature fell. Panting, soaked in bile and blood, he backed away. His breath came in wheezing gasps. His vision doubled. One of his eyes had begun to glow faintly. He hadn't noticed before. The wall pulse stopped. The presence retreated, satisfied. Skritch stood tall, bloody, broken, grinning. Tested, yes, but not broken. No. Worthy. He knelt beside the corpse and dipped his claw into its blood. With it, he smeared a crude symbol upon the stone, a clawed crown atop a crooked spiral, the mark of his rising, a prophecy in gore. From deeper in the tunnels a wind stirred, not natural. It carried the scent of mold and old secrets, and beneath it more whispers. Not one voice now, but many. Skritch Vilefang, Clawlord, Prophet Rat, rise, rise, rise. He stood and walked toward the dark, not as a survivor, but as a chosen thing. Chapter 3. Worm Things Below. The path sloped ever downward, deeper into the bowel tunnels of the Under-Empire. Skritch Vilefang moved like a shadow with teeth, hunched and twitching, his clawed feet slipping over wet stone and slick rot pools. The air was thicker here, cloying, humid, heavy with the smell of old flesh and newer death. Above him, roots dangled from the ceiling like veins torn from the earth, pulsing with slow, alien rhythm. Below his feet, the ground was soft with decay. No map etched this route, no rat runner dared claim it. These tunnels were not part of any Skaven warren, nor ruined dwarf hold, nor human mine. They were older, unnatural, dug, not by claw or pick, but by hunger. Worm things had made this place. The tunnel walls bore the proof. Long grooves like claw marks, only too wide and too smooth, carved by the passage of things vast and burrowing. He'd passed dozens of carcasses along the way, half-melted bones, broken chitin, the half-digested corpses of rat-men with their skulls crushed inward and ribs bent outward like metal bent by heat. The tunnels breathed here. Faint, pulsing gusts of warm air exhaled from cracks in the stone, bringing with them wet sounds, slithers and gulps and bone gnaws. Something was feeding nearby. Skritch stopped in a hollow where the ceiling opened to reveal a fungal canopy. the spores glowing dimly above like diseased stars. Pools of slime reflected their pale light. Beneath one, something shifted, too large to be a rat, too soft to be stone. He crouched. His ears twitched. The voice came again, not whispered now, but sung, a low, thrumming chant that vibrated in his bones, down the tunnels deep, where flesh crawls and maggots weep. It was not a voice he heard with ears. It sang in his mind, coiling between his thoughts like smoke between teeth. He didn't flinch, he didn't run. Skritch smiled. "Joe, see me, great hunger. Let me pass, or be devoured first," he hissed, gripping the warpfang tighter. The slime bubbled. In the largest pool, it rose. A segmented bulk, thicker than a rat ogre's torso, slick with mucus and stitched with barnacle-like eyes. The creature was a tunnel worm, but not the kind Skritch had fought in surface warrens. This one was touched, mutated. Its hide bore scars that twitched. Its face split open into a radial bloom of flesh fronds, all ringed with fang, and embedded in its forehead, shining like a cancerous gem, was a fragment of warpstone. Skritch's pupils shrank. "Yes," he hissed, voice almost reverent. "War-blessed meat beast." The worm screeched, a horrible noise, wet and sharp and wrong. It surged forward with terrifying speed, dislodging the smaller worms beneath it. They followed in a tide of pink-gray flesh, a horde of slithering young, eager to taste anything that moved. Skritch moved first. The warp fang arced through the air, cleaving one of the smaller worms in half. Its ichors sprayed in hot ropes across his chest. Another leapt at him, no legs, no limbs, only tooth and muscle. He caught it mid-air on his tail blade, impaling the thing through its gaping. But they came faster. They swarmed his legs, wrapping around his thighs, chewing at armor straps, snapping with rows of circular teeth. One latched onto his ankle and twisted. He screamed more in fury than pain, and slammed the haft of the warfang into the worm until it split open like a burst bladder. The great worm loomed behind the swarm, watching, testing, waiting for him to tire. It opened its mouth. From within, a second mouth slid forward, an inner jaw like a serpent with claws. It snapped inches from his head. Skritch ducked under the strike, leapt onto a chunk of stone jutting from the slime. His foot slipped. He fell, landed hard on his shoulder, heard the pop of bone shifting wrong. No time, no weakness. He screamed and bit down on his own tongue until blood filled his mouth. The pain focused him. The worm lunged again. He met it head-on. Warfang struck deep into its side, biting through layers of flesh. The blade hummed with dark energy, drawing from the corrupted stone embedded in the beast. Skritch felt it, like a current of fire rushing into his veins. The worm thrashed violently, knocking him free, slamming his body into a wall with enough force to fracture stone. Bones cracked, blood spattered the rock. Still, he stood. Worn, poisoned, and half dead, Skritch laughed. He ripped a jagged shard of warpstone from the floor, no bigger than a fang, and shoved it between his teeth, grinding it with a snarl. The raw energy seared his throat, burned his gums, flared behind his eyes. But it answered him. His mutated arms surged with strength, pulsing as the claws extended into hooked talons. His spine cracked, vertebrae shifting. He roared. With both hands, he hurled the warfang into the worm's mouth. The weapon vanished down its throat. A heartbeat later, the creature shuddered, twitched, froze, then detonated. The warpstone within its skull reacted violently to the foreign blade. Its insides boiled, expanding until the beast burst apart with a wet explosion. Guts sprayed across the cavern in great arcs, coating the floor and walls in scalding filth. The swarm of smaller worms convulsed in shared agony, then retreated into cracks, writhing and mewling, leaving trails of echo as they fled. Silence returned. Skritch collapsed to his knees, coughing blood and laughing. His fur was soaked in gore, but his eyes gleamed. He pulled the warfang from the smoking remains of the wyrm, now cracked and steaming, its shaft etched with fresh runes from the explosion. He looked at the fragment of warpstone still clutched in his claw. He hit it. It cut his tongue as it went down. Blessed, I am blessed. The voice in the walls returned. Louder now. Clear. Worm killer. Flesh ripper. Rise, rise. Rise. Skritch licked the ichor from his claws and crawled forward. He did not walk now. He ascended. Chapter 4. The Fungus Court. The walls began to bleed light. Not bright, not clean, but sickly, glowing in shades of pus-caliber and bruised purple, like infection made visible. The tunnel narrowed and bloomed open again into a fungal hollow, a cavernous dome choked with decay. It pulsed with warm breath and hung thick with spores that shimmered as they drifted, like a slow, choking snowfall of rot. Skritch Vilefang entered this place with his blade dragging behind him, trailing a smear of gore across the stone. His fur was patchy, mottled with blood and slime. His shoulders hunched lower than before, not from weakness, but from weight. The warpstone he'd eaten burrowed inside him now, reshaping things. His bones no longer fit cleanly. He didn't care. He had killed the worm. He had walked through its children. Now he walked into madness. And the madness welcomed him. The cavern stank of old flesh and damp mushrooms. Fungal stalks rose like petrified trees, bulbous and mottled with veins. Some stood tall as warp-fire throwers, others squat and wide like bloated toads. A few pulsed with color when Skritch neared, glowing brighter, releasing clouds of glittering dust. He paused, ears twitching, tail flicking irritably through the mold mist. There was no wind, yet the stalks leaned toward him. He hissed, then sniffed. The air tasted sweet, too sweet. A sickly sugar tang crept into his brain, thick and sticky. His heart pounded in his ears, not fast but slow, distant, like someone else's heartbeat thrumming through his skull. The warfang felt heavier. His clawed hand trembled. Then he saw them. Figures. Shapes in the gloom. Not solid, not quite. Not Skaven. Not alive. They danced between the fungi like smoke given form, hunched silhouettes with too long limbs and wide grinning mouths. Their eyes glowed like lanterns in the fog, but their faces were wrong. Twisted mockeries of ratmen, masks carved in mold. They did not move in silence. They chattered. Skritch, Skritch, claw lord thing. MC, joint. We remember you. Lost, broken, now returned. He raised his halberd. Show yourselves. Speak true or die. The hallucinations only giggled. One stepped forward, larger than the others, draped in robes grown from living moss and cap flesh. Its skull was bare, but its mouth had been sewn shut with fungal tendrils, yet it still spoke. Court waits. Court sees. You're chosen, yes, sit throne, wear crown. Skritch stumbled back, his tail sweeping through a puff of spores. He inhaled and staggered as the world twisted. The cavern expanded, then breathed. Walls pulsed like lungs. The floor became meat, the air rippled. Suddenly he was not alone. His warband stood before him, those who had died screaming during the surface raid. Snickelknaw, Kratchik, even Scabber, his throat still torn open, smiled with broken teeth. You failed to fail us, Clawlord, Scabber hissed. Led us to fire death. No, no, Skritch barked, backing away, eyes wild. You followed, you obeyed. It was their fault. Skything's cannons, lies. And Schnickelgnaw stepped forward. The flesh on his face peeled back like wet paper, revealing skull and maggot nests. We died for your greed. Skritch struck without hesitation. The warfang carved through the hallucinations, splitting phantom flesh and bone. Blood, too thick and too blue, splattered the fungi. The ghosts screamed, then laughed, faces melting as they fell. The mushrooms cheered. Their caps opened like mouths, releasing a harmony of chittering shrieks. Skritch turned, spinning, blade flashing. He hacked apart stalks, sliced through glowing growths, until the cavern itself seemed to scream in chorus. Then came the real attack. From beneath the floor meat, something rose, a tangle of tendrils, sinew, and snapping capjaws. Fungal guardians, alive with wrath. They moved like worms, but struck like vipers, dragging themselves towards Skritch on cords of root and spore vein. One lashed out, catching his leg. He screamed as the tendrils split open and bit, not with teeth but with filament needles that burrowed under his skin. He hacked wildly, slicing it free, but more came. They wrapped around him, arms, legs, neck. One clamped onto his muzzle. He bit it, tore it off, spat spores and blood. Dies split. I am warlord. I am blessed. With a final surge, he drove the warpfang into the cavern floor. The blade flared green. A pulse of warp energy erupted outward, ripping through the fungus with burning light. Screams, real and imagined, filled the hollow as mushrooms ignited, stalks cracked, tendrils withered and turned to ash. The spore cloud ignited like gas, bursting into a bloom of sickly fire. Skritch fell to his knees in the center of it all, coughing blood, mucus, smoke. Around him, the fungus court burned. The illusions died with it. He sat in silence, the floor now charred and dry. His own breathing was shallow, hoarse. He was burned, bitten, blistered, half mad, but alive. From above, a single spore drifted down, one last glowing mote. It landed on his snout. He stared at it. He whispered. Further down, root of truth, throne of flesh. Skritch stood, and he followed. Chapter 5. The Council of Teeth. The stench hit first. Wet fur, fresh blood, musk sweat, and unwashed fear. Skritch Vilefang flattened himself against the tunnel wall, breathing through clenched teeth as he peered through the cracked masonry of a collapsed archway. The chamber ahead was vast and sunken, a half-drowned cistern turned into a lair, lit by flickering torches that cast greasy shadows across the slime-slick stone. There were cages, dozens of them, cages made of bone and rusted pipe, stacked in heaps, filled with twitching, mewling things, Skaven, half-starved and limp. Many were missing tails, eyes, or entire limbs. Warprats prowled between them, gnawing freely, sometimes dragging away the living. This was not a warring. This was a kennel. Clan Molder, Skritch thought, lips curling back from fangs. He knew the stink. Flesh crafters, beast breeders. Monsters who shaped muscle and bone like potter's clay, twisted things with too many eyes and too little sanity. And they were here. Below him, seated on a raised dais of riveted steel and flayed hide, was the master of this kennel. An obese, gnarled warlock packmaster with copper rods jammed into his skull and a chain-fused spine that hissed with every breath. His name Skritch did not know, but the rats called him Gnurl the Binder. Ignoral was flanked by his council, a trio of ratmen more beast than Skaven. One bore the bloated musculature of a rat ogre, but with the twitchy eyes and cruel smirk of a warlock engineer. Another was stitched with armor plate into its flesh, a living shield. The last had no face at all, only a warpstone lens fused to its skull, leaking green light as it gibbered and whispered nonsense. They were speaking, arguing. Skritch crept closer, slinking along the ledge like a shadow of knives. Their voices rose and fell in shrieks and growls. Already no, the graftings fail, they scream burst after 2 days. Need more marrow stock, more cages, more things to mix-match. Council grows hungry. Binder promises meat, not failures. Skritch's ears twitched. He saw his opening. A chained rat ogre stood at the far edge of the room, slumbering. Its back was covered in crude metal plates, bolted into muscle. Its jaw had been removed and replaced with a cage of bone blades. Its eyes were sewn shut, but it sniffed the air constantly. Monster, but a weapon. If Skritch could bait it, break it, unleash it... He smiled. He slid into the darkness. The plan was simple, chaos and slaughter. The Molder feared only one thing, loss of control. So Skritch gave them none. He struck like wrought fire in dry straw. First, the cages. He found the mechanisms, crude levers of bone and wire, and tore them loose with a snap of his warped claw. Gates crashed open. Half-mad prisoners swarmed free, biting, squealing, clawing their jailers. Warp rats screeched, dragged into the tide and ripped apart. The council howled. Ignoral stood, screaming orders, but too late. Skritch leapt from the shadows, the warfang spinning in a deadly arc. It caught the first counselor mid-chest, splitting armor, bone, and heart with a wet crunch. The thing died before it could even scream. The second turned, howled, lashed out with claws thicker than Skritch's arm. Too slow. Skritch ducked, rolled, and drove his tail blade deep into its groin. The beast spasmed violently, its innards tearing free in a boiling flood. He yanked upward, gutting it like a butchered pig. The third, faceless, gibbering, ran into the melee, clawing at anything that moved. It killed 2 prisoners before a warp rat, bloated and foaming, pounced and chewed through its throat. Skritch turned to Ignoral. The packmaster raised a crackling staff, spitting lightning. It struck Skritch's shoulder, searing flesh from bone. He screamed, rage, not pain, and charged. Warpfang met staff in a shower of sparks. Steel and bone clashed. Skritch lunged, bit deep into Ignoral's shoulder, tore a chunk of flesh free. The warlock shrieked, slammed his knee into Skritch's gut, but the warlord didn't stop. He kept going, claw, tearing, gnawing, until the packmaster collapsed beneath him in a pool of his own bubbling fat and blood. Skritch rose, covered in gore. The room had become an abattoir. Broken bodies twitched beneath shattered cages. Rats fought over intestines. The chained ogre howled as fire spread across its fur. One of the prisoners had set it ablaze with stolen oil. It bucked and snapped its chains. Then, with a bellow that cracked the walls, it ripped free. Skritch turned just in time to see it charging him. The beast struck like a battering ram, knocking him flying. He slammed into a pillar, coughed blood, scrambled up. The ogre roared, blind and flaming. Skritch leapt onto its back. The chain spine beneath his feet burned hot. He climbed the creature like a wall, drove the warfang straight into the back of its skull, again. Finally the beast collapsed, still twitching, fire devouring its flesh. Skritch stood atop the corpse, triumphant. The chamber fell to silence. The surviving rats, all of them, stared. Skritch pointed the warfang at them, blood dripping from its edge. "You obey now, yes, yes." They nodded. A dozen, maybe 2. Enough. He stepped down from the corpse, limping, breath ragged, eyes blazing. "I am Skritch, warlord, claw lord. You serve, or you die." None argued. Not that day. As the flames died, and the scent of burnt fur clung to the stone, Skritch found a crude map etched into Gnarl's wall, a route deep through the Under-Empire, marked in claw runes and warning glyphs. The path home. But first, more trials. More death. He smiled, teeth cracked and red. "Let them try. I am the Warpfanged, the Rat-Crowned. The Horned One chooses me." And in the walls, something laughed with him. Chapter 6. Kleeless no more. The tunnels sang of old blood, not in melody, but in memory. Walls slick with ancient stains, claw scratches etched into the stone like the script of war long past. This was the bleeding maw, a fracture vein beneath the rib caverns of the Under-Empire. Here countless skirmishes had clawed through cycles of betrayal. Here rats had eaten rats until only dust and teeth remained. Now Skritch Vilefang returned. He stepped over bones so old they turned to paste underfoot, his followers padding behind in wary silence. 20 strong now, survivors of the Fungus court, escaped beasts from the molder den, chittering loyalists driven half-mad by battle and spores. They followed him not out of love, but because he was death that walked. His flesh had changed again. The warpstone he'd consumed had nested in his gut, curling its influence around his spine. His posture was straighter, unnatural. His bad arm, his blessed arm, had become a thing of spurs and knobs, the skin leathery and taut over pulsating muscle. It twitched with hunger when he passed the dead. He let it. They were close now. He could smell them, the scent of old kin, of rusted steel and boiled rat meat, of musk he once called home. The Clocken burrows. Not the heart of Clan Moors, no. A forgotten artery. A splinter cell cast out after a failed coup and generations of treachery. Skritch had ruled this place once, before exile, before madness, before prophecy. The burrow yawned open before them, a jagged wound in the stone, ringed by crumbling gateposts and half-eaten banners. 2 guards stood watch, lean and bored, one picking his teeth with a bone splinter. They never saw death coming. Skritch lunged. Warpfang sang as it cut. One god's head rolled before his body knew it was dead. The other tried to run. Skritch's tail blade caught him mid-sprint, driving through spine and throat. He writhed like a speared insect. The warband poured in behind him, squealing triumph. "No sound," Skritch barked, voice harsh. "No alert, we move. Kill fast." They slipped into the burrows like disease. Inside, the tunnels had grown fat and lazy. Crude machines churned meat paste into feeding troughs. Nest bedding overflowed into walkways. Slaves scuttled without leashes. It was a den of weaklings. He would gut them all. Skritch led the slaughter personally. Room by room, corridor by corridor, a knife in the veins. His warband moved like maggots in flesh, chewing through guards, seizing stores, pulling limbs from sockets and teeth from skulls. One den mother squealed in her brood nest, holding her squealing kits. Skritch paused only a moment, then set fire to the nest and walked on as her shrieks echoed. Mercy was a surface word. At last they reached the center. The chamber was old, domed, ringed with banners so dust-thick they crumbled at a breath. In the center stood a crude dais, and upon it warlord Rickethok, current master of the Clocken. Fat from safety, bloated with victory not his. He wore stolen armor that hung off his jowls like a metal bib. He rose as Skritch entered, flanked by a dozen personal guards. "You live," No, no, I saw you fall, fail. You're gone, dead. Skritch said nothing. He walked forward slowly, dragging the warfang. Rikithok sneered. You come to beg Kroll to serve me now? I can be Mercy King, yes? The guard stepped forward. Skritch raised his claw and pointed. His warband leapt from the tunnels behind him with a scream of blades and teeth. The guards barely had time to form a wall before they were overwhelmed, dragged down under claws and tail knives, flesh ripped from bone, eyes plucked like berries. One tried to flee. Skritch caught him by the neck, lifted him off the ground and squeezed until the spine popped. Rikithok turned to run. Too late. Skritch lunged, grabbed him by the throat and slammed him down onto the dais. Stone cracked. His claws tore through the stolen armor like paper. Rikith begged, cried, called for the horned rat. Skritch bent close. No god hears you now, only me. He sank his teeth into the warlord's face, ripping away cheek, eye, jawbone. Blood sprayed across the dais. Skritch tore out the tongue and held it high. I speak now, he roared. The chamber shook with howls. The remaining Clocken bowed, groveled, fell to their knees. Some clawed open their own chests to show submission. Skritch turned in a circle, body steaming with blood. He raised the warpfun high, its blade gleamed, cracked and glowing. I return, I rule, Clocken is mine. 1,000 voices screamed in answer. He stood upon the corpse of his usurper. Not clanless now, not broken, but at warlord once more. Chapter 7. Warp-blessed, warp-cursed. The pain began behind his eye. A soft twitch at first, a flutter of flesh, like a heartbeat misplaced. Then the pressure built. Hot, pulsing, as though something lived inside his skull. Curling claws around his thoughts and scratching to be let out. Skritch Vilefang stood before the rusted reflection of a shattered mirror shard embedded in the burrow wall. His face stared back, barely his anymore. The fur had thinned along his jaw, and beneath it purple veins pulsed like roots. One eye was clouded, shot through with a green glow that throbbed in sync with the warpstone lodged in his guts. He twitched. Then his eye burst, not with blood, but with light, green fire spilling down his cheek in weeping streams of raw magic. He screamed, a keening wail that echoed through the burrow. Rats scurried and scattered like sparks from flint. He clawed at his face, shredding fur and skin in a frenzy, but no blood came, only more of that warp fire, oozing, laughing. Inside his skull, something watched. Yes, yes, it whispered, warm and wet, changing, rising, breaking free. Skritch stumbled back from the wall, panting, drooling. His warped claw flexed involuntarily, tearing grooves into the stone. Too much, too fast. The blessings of the horned rat were not given. They were taken, in pieces, and his body was breaking beneath the weight. He dropped to all fours, vomiting a thick sludge of bile and blood flecked with shimmering green shards. He stared at it, panting, wheezing. Warpstone. His vomit bled warpstone. He laughed. Behind him, the chamber door creaked. One of his lieutenants crept in, Vretch, a one-eyed brute with spiked armor and a brain full of knives. My lord, you scream again, loud, echoes scatter. Skritch rose slowly, face twisted into a rictus grin, blood still dripping from his mouth. I grow stronger. Feel it, yes. Yes, warp blesses me. I become... Britch bowed low, but Skritch saw the twitch in his tail, the subtle shift of unease. Too many had begun to watch him like that. Too many had begun to whisper. They spoke in corners, behind nests and beneath the feast pits, about his eye, his fits, the way he didn't sleep, the way he spoke to walls. Chosen, he says, yes, yes, but chosen for what? Death? Madness? Skritch heard them all. And tonight, he answered. He gathered the warband in the blood pit, the arena where disobedient slaves were fed to razor rats or used as training toys for the claw brutes. Torches hissed on the walls. The stone reeked of old meat. The pack was restless. Eyes glinted in the dark. Skritch stood atop a jagged stone slab, breathing ragged through a split jaw. His eye socket still burned, leaking occasional droplets of fire. He said nothing. He raised a hand. Then he pointed to Vrechk. You, down. The lieutenant hesitated. Then, sneering, stepped into the pit. No weapons, no armor, Skritch growled. We strip. We bleed. The one who stands command. The warband hissed and squealed in delight. Vrech snarled, baring yellow teeth. You weaken, Clawlord. Fever mad. Let me end you quick. Skritch dropped his blade, tore off his harness. His body twitched with mutation, ridges beneath his skin, knots of pulsing bone. His arm was a weapon all its own now. His teeth had multiplied. He spread his arms wide. Try, traitor thing, try. Vrechk rushed him with a scream, claws outstretched, fast, brutal. Skritch caught him by the throat mid-leap, slammed him into the stone. Bones cracked, blood sprayed. The crowd howled. Vrechk flailed, raked claws down Skritch's chest, slicing deep. Skritch didn't flinch. He leaned in, lips to ear. I hear your whispers. I feast on them. Then he bit. Teeth sank into Vrechk's skull, cracking it open like a nut. The body spasmed, shook, then stilled. Skritch rose, dripping blood and gray matter, arms raised. I am not cursed, he roared. I am becoming. The Horned One remakes me, limb by limb, mind by mind. The warband screamed as one, voices layered with terror and worship. Skritch turned, eyes blazing. He saw no challengers, only prey. Later, in the silence of his chamber, he sat alone. The whispers returned, softer now, closer, filled with the last squin. And see with true eyes? Skritch touched his face. A new eye was growing. Much flesh, not bone, but stone, wapstone, and pulsed in the dark, and it smiled. Chapter 8. The Screaming Spiral. The descent began with silence. Not peace, but absence, the kind of quiet that swallows footsteps, devours sound, and makes even Skaven ears strain to hear the beat of their own heart. Skritch Vilefang led the warband into the spiral with his claws tight on the warfang, tail dragging a long smear of blood behind him. The wound across his chest still wept from the duel with Vrech, but he felt no pain. Pain was for the weak, for the half-dead. He was something else now. The screaming spiral was a forbidden path, one of the oldest and deepest wound tunnels in the Under-Empire. Carved in twisting helix through the bedrock of the world, it led to the ghost veins of ancient Skaven cities devoured by time and madness. No maps, no safe holds. Only warlocks, heretics, and the dead dared travel it. Skritch dared. The tunnel walls curled like entrails, coated in a thin layer of flesh-like mold. Bones, hundreds, maybe thousands, were embedded in the spiral walls like decorations, or warnings. Femurs arranged in spirals, skulls cracked into glyphs. Some still twitched. Not right, muttered one of the newer warriors, his voice dry. Tunnel breathes. Skritch didn't answer. He felt it too. The spiral exhaled beneath their claws, warm drafts of stale air puffing upward from below. With every step, the tunnel seemed to constrict tighter, like a throat swallowing prey. And then the silence ended. A souse began from below. A high-pitched note, distant, steady. Like a scream held on a single breath, stretched too long. Witch noise spat a scarred plague priest beside Skritch. It eats minds. The warband shifted uneasily. One of them, a twitchy runt named Drek, began to hum along with the sound, his eyes glazed, drool trailing from his lips. Then his claws went to his face. He dug. Skritch turned as Drek screamed and ripped his own eyes out, giggling as black ichor sprayed. No, too loud, too bright, it sings from the walls, it sings. Skritch drove his blade through Drek's chest in a single, clean motion. The body crumpled. The noise lingered. They moved faster after that. Half a day later, though time meant nothing here, they reached the first spiral gate. A massive arch of brass and bone blocked the way forward, the door locked by glyphs of living warpstone that twitched when approached. Mechanical sigils scuttled across its surface like beetles, rearranging themselves every few heartbeats. Guarding the gate were two constructs, Skrir-made horrors long forgotten, rat machines shaped like centipedes, powered by warp flame and bound with the twitching brains of tortured warlocks. They attacked without warning. The first construct let out a pulse scream, a wave of sound that shattered skulls. One of Skritch's pack collapsed, ears pouring blood, eyes deflating. The other machine surged forward, limbs clicking, drills whirring, limbs lashing. Skritch bellowed, lunged straight into the chaos. His warp flesh sang with rage. His claws caught the first machine under the mandibles and ripped. Metal and bone split with a shriek. The construct sprayed hot green mist from its vents, trying to blind him. He slammed its head into the ground, again and again, until the warp core ruptured. It exploded, peeling the flesh from 3 nearby rats. Skritch stood in the blast, steaming, his fur singed, jaw dislocated. He popped it back into place with a crack. The second construct impaled a pack rat, lifted him into the air and drank him, metal tendrils siphoning blood and brain into hissing tubes. Skritch leapt onto its back and bit the main control node, crunching down until something sparked and died. It collapsed beneath him. Silence returned, except for the scream. Always the scream. The gate opened with a wet, sighing groan. Inside was not a tunnel, but a chamber. A dome of mirrors, glass and bone, filled with echoes of every death ever suffered here. Reflections danced across the walls. Skaven long dead, still dying. One showed Skritch himself, twisted, ground, crowned with horns. Another showed him broken, twitching, dragging his guts behind him like a slug. He snarled, "I no see what I become. No mirror tells me." He smashed the closest one with a claw. The scream rose louder. Now it had words. "Skritch, rise, fall, chosen of no one. Death waits." No, no. He fell to his knees. The warpstone eye in his socket pulsed once, hard, and the scream stopped. Dead silence. The mirrors cracked, all at once, and from behind them something came through. A warlock thing, Skria-forged, half rat, half engine, once a master, now a ghost in steel. It floated on a cloud of static, its voice a chorus of the damned. You trespass on scream path. You walk where none should scurry. Leave, or die. Skritch stood slowly. No, the ghost lunged. Blades met bone. Warp fire met warp flesh. They clashed like gods. Sparks lit the chamber. The ceiling cracked. Skritch was thrown once, twice, but always rose. His blade sank deep into the warlock's chest. Steam hissed from broken pipes. The ghost laughed as it died. Too late, rod thing. You already scream. And then it exploded. When the dust cleared, Skritch stood alone. Half his warband was gone, dead or screaming. But the path forward lay open. He turned without a word, and the spiral screamed on. Chapter 9 Deals with the Dark Furred. There were tunnels in the Under-Empire even Skaven feared to name. Paths that curved where they should not. Stone that bled when touched. Lights that flickered with no flame. Skritch Vilefang's warband had been reduced again, boiled down by battles, betrayal, and the screaming of the spiral. Only 11 now, 11 from an army of hundreds. But these weren't soldiers, they were fanatics. Warped, hardened, obsessed. They followed not out of loyalty, but because they feared what would become of them if they didn't. The air was thicker here. The walls had changed. No more brickwork, no ancient Skaven stone, just root-veined flesh and smooth black glass, rippling when passed. The scent of the tunnel was worse than rot. It was memory. It reeked of forgotten lives, of things that had died and still remembered. They came to a gate. Not built, not forged, grown. A lattice of bone twisted into an arch that pulsed with silent breath. Veins ran across it, green ichor beneath the surface. The entrance was sealed by a curtain of shadow things, moving like oil through smoke. Shapes swam through it. Claws, teeth, smiles. The clawkin halted. One whispered, back, Claw. Not this path, not this thing." Skritch ignored him. He stepped forward, and the curtain parted. Beyond was a cathedral of flesh. Vaulted ribs formed the ceiling. Meat membranes hung like banners. The floor pulsed beneath every footstep, soft and warm like the belly of something enormous and sleeping. And at its center, a throne, made of bones. Bone of rat, dwarf, man, and other. Tall, crooked, and on it sat a figure draped in stitched pelts of albino fur, his tail curled around the base of the throne like a dead serpent. His fur was darker than pitch, slick with a shine not of oil, but of blood too old to dry. His eyes were wrong. Not green, not red, but empty. Hollow. He smiled. "Ah, warlord thing. Skritch Vilefang. So bold, yes. So broken." Skritch's claws twitched on his weapon. "You know my name. Good. That saves us time. I need passage. The way below is blocked. The tunnel collapsed. You know a path." The dark-furred figure chuckled. The sound echoed like claws tapping on bone. "I know many paths. All lead somewhere. Most to death. You will show me now?" "No." Skritch bared his teeth. "I will flay it from you if I must." "No," the figure said again, calmly. "You will bargain, or you will fail." A silence stretched, long and sharp. Then Skritch growled, "What do you want?" The thrown creature smiled wider. "Memory." Skritch blinked. "I want the moment you knew you would kill your father. I want the taste of his blood. I want your first betrayal. I want the lies you told when you were still small, soft, and thought you were clever." Skritch's eye flared. "I give flesh, not mind." The figure rose. He was taller than he had any right to be. His shadow stretched far, too far. His claws gleamed, not with metal, but with something older. Carved bone, each finger a blade. "Then you fail. You die beneath stone. You rot with your dreams of claw crowns." Skritch stood silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he bowed his head. "Take one." The figure moved with unnatural grace, gliding down the throne to stand before Skritch. He reached out one long claw and tapped Skritch's forehead. The warlord screamed. His body buckled, his spine arched, eyes rolled back. He saw a memory rip from him. A tiny version of himself, cowering in a nest den. A larger Skaven, his father, beating him with the blunt edge of a rust sword. Laughter, pain, the stink of fear, and then Skritch, biting into the old male's throat, over and over, until his teeth touched spine. The moment faded. The pain remained. Skritch collapsed, twitching. The figure stepped back. "You may pass." He turned and gestured. From the side wall, a slab of meat parted like a wound, revealing a tunnel of glistening black stone that curved impossibly downward, like falling into the throat of the world. Skritch rose, staggering. "You lied," he hissed. "I always lie." Skritch raised the warp fang and lunged. The blade passed through smoke. The throne was empty. Only bones remained, and laughter. Laughter that crawled up his spine and lived behind his teeth. He passed through the new tunnel with his warband silent behind him. They did not speak of what had happened. They did not ask what had been taken. Skritch didn't know if he could have answered, because now, when he thought of his father, there was only darkness, and a smile not his own. Chapter 10. Barokin Reborn. The tunnel exhaled rot. The air was humid, clotted with the reek of generations, sour milk, wet fur, and scorched blood. Skritch Vilefang stepped cautiously through the rupture in the stone vein, one claw tight around the haft of the warfang, the other dragging across the wall for balance. His body still trembled from the dark-furred one's theft. Something was missing, and he felt it, like a phantom tooth torn from his skull. His warband followed, gaunt-eyed, broken back. There were 7 now. Only 7. Half mad and half dead, but still they came. Still they believed. Because he kept walking, and because something called them deeper. The passage opened suddenly, not into another tunnel, but into a womb. That was the only word. A vast cavern, round and warm and moist, pulsing with red light from swollen orbs embedded in the ceiling like diseased suns. The ground was soft and spongy, webbed with thick cords of sinew and pulsating vein roots. The smell hit like a club. Fermented birth slime and decades of stagnant life. It was a birthing chamber. A forgotten one. Dozens, no, hundreds of growth sacs lined the chamber walls, each as tall as a Skaven, some split open, some still pulsing. Inside, things twitched. Skritch stepped closer to one and wiped away the mucus covering it. Inside was a half-born Skaven, limbs thin and malformed, eyes sealed shut, but alive. Its mouth opened and closed in slow, mechanical rhythm. Behind him, one of his followers dropped to their knees. "The Clocken birthing vault," the rat gasped, voice choked with awe and terror. Lost. Sealed in the collapse. We thought it buried forever." Skritch stared in silence. Then he smiled. He moved to the control pit. A mound of flesh mechanica loomed in the center, half cremine, half organ. Pipes fed into it from the walls. Bone levers stuck out like broken fingers. Old glyphs pulsed across its surface in pale, dying light. Skritch approached, wiping thick slime from one of the runes with a claw. "Still breathes," he whispered. "Still lives." He reached down and plunged his claw into the main socket. A jolt of energy surged through him, his back arching, mouth opening in a soundless scream. The warpstone in his skull flashed, green fire bleeding from his eye socket. And the machine woke. A roar echoed through the chamber as the birthing sacs twitched in unison. The walls pulsed. The light brightened. Glands released fresh fluid. Alarms howled in ancient Skaven dialect. Birth bells. The process had begun. The first birth was violent. A sac ruptured with a wet pop, spraying yellow fluid across the stone. A half-grown Skaven spilled out, shrieking, claws flailing. Its body was wrong, bigger than normal, bones ridged and dense, eyes glowing faintly green from warp exposure. Another burst. Then another. Soon the chamber was filled with newborns. Dozens, then hundreds, crawling, gnashing, howling as they clawed their way from the womb. But they did not flee, they did not scatter. They looked to Skritch. He stood above them, backlit by flickering red, coated in birthing gore and the remains of his sanity. The war-pong pulsed with power in his grip. He raised it high. "I am Skritch Vilefang, warlord of the Clawkin, born of blood and fire and prophecy." The newborns shrieked in chorus, echoing his words in animal mimicry. He stepped down among them, claws trailing over their heads, marking them with his blood. "You are mine, reborn in the flesh of the Horned One. No weak meat, no runtlings, only claws, only teeth." The newborn squealed too loud. He crushed its skull underfoot. The rest fell silent. As hours passed, the chamber filled with life. From the original 7 survivors, only 3 remained. The rest had been torn apart in the birthing frenzy or killed by Skritch for weakness. He stood now atop a pillar of fused stone and spine, overlooking his army. Over 200 newborns crouched below, their eyes glowing green, their claws sharper than they should be. They were not perfect, but they were his. These burrowkin reborn. He would feed them, he would train them, he would lead them. Skritch turned to the exit tunnel, still collapsed, still sealed. He raised both arms and howled. "Dig, dig, claw break stone, we rise." And they did. They tore into the rock with screams and frenzy, ripping through bedrock, soil, bone. They did not stop, did not rest, as if they knew their creator demanded it. And behind them, Skritch watched. Warpstone burning in his skull, the flesh of prophecy in his claws. And in the dark above, the horned rat laughed. Chapter 11. The clans conspire. The summons spread through the Under-Empire like blood through broken veins. Warlord Skritch Vilefang lived. He had crawled from fire and ruin, slain warlords, crushed kin, birthed an army from the rot of a sealed vault and marched it screaming into the tunnels. His name became a disease whispered in the ears of seers and warmongers alike. The clans stirred. Rival warlords, scenting threat and madness, sent spies, scouts, poisoned claws. None returned. And so, as Skritch and his warspawn carved a path through the bedrock, digging and devouring, the clans conspired. High above the spiral tunnels, beneath a cathedral of sewage and sacrificial bone, the council gathered. They were not the great council. Skritch was not yet worthy of such notice, but they were old names in old blood. Each a power unto themselves. From Clan Scryer came Engineer Master Thizzik, face half melted from his own warp bomb, eyes replaced by twitching brass globes. He wheezed through copper nostrils, voice a shrill static. From Clan Eshin came Shadow Weaver Crick, cloaked in stitched rat skin, blades hidden under fur, tongue forked from too many poisons. From Mulder, Packlord Feshtnar, bloated with graft, his spine twisted into a leash pole from which 4 shrieking rat things dangled, each one bearing a different expression of pain. Even a robed representative of Clan Pestilence attended, Plague Seer Vermis, his jaw sagging from disease, breath thick with phlegm that dripped to the floor and hissed. Skritch lives. Worse, he marches, spat Tizik, sparks flying from his snout. "We ignore mock him. No more." "Too loud, too bold," hissed Crick. "He grows fat on tunnels we abandon. Dangerous dumb. Yes, yes." "Too many spawnlings," said Packlord Fesht, one of his tethered minions, vomiting a string of teeth. "He breeds like Godrat himself." "Blasphemous," goggled Vermis, wiping ooze from his holy scrolls. "He walks where none should crawl." The council agreed. Skritch must be stopped, but not by open war. That would cost, that would burn. No. Skaven killed smarter. They would cut him, rot him, turn him against himself. Each clan pledged a weapon. Skryre would send lightning things. Eshin would send death fangs. Molder a gift beast. Pestilence a blessing. A plague sealed in a bone vial, carried by wind and vermin. All to one place, Black Crack Bastion. A ruined citadel that once held a surface breach, now long collapsed, repurposed as a trap. They would lure Skritch there with lies, scent trails, false maps, make him believe it was the surface path. Salvation. Home. And when he entered, look, Skritch stood on a ledge above his army. The tunnel ahead split like a mouth, choked with rubble, but pulsing with fresh scent. Surface air. Thin, dry, hopeful. He had seen the glyphs scratched into the stone, found the discarded sigils of old patrols. Every instinct, every memory screamed the same. This way, up, out. Victory. His claws clenched the warp fang. It trembled with hunger. "So soon," he muttered, breath steaming in the cold air. "Soon above. Real light. Real war. They see me, know me, fear me." His army howled behind him, nearly 200 strong, most from the birthing vaults, their bodies wrong, tall, hunched, twitching with warp-infused growth. Some dragged crude blades, others wore armor welded directly into their flesh. He turned to them. "We rise, we take. Take what is ours, the world above, the sky meet, the sun-sick surface. We climb now, we kill forever." They screamed as one, and they marched. Blackgrass Bastion rose from the tunnel like a tumor of stone and rust. It still bore the scars of old war, collapsed gates, pitted towers, banners half consumed by mold. The scent of sky trickled from the upper halls, the scent of promise. Skritch entered at the head of his swarm. He did not see the glyphs burned into the walls, scry runes long faded. He did not feel the threads of shadow trailing his steps, Eshin blades hiding in cracks above. He did not smell the sweet, rotting perfume of disease, but he felt watched. He paused in the main hall, a grand vault of broken pillars and smashed idols. He sniffed the air. Rug, too clean, too placed. His eye pulsed. "Ready, blades," he growled. The bastion erupted. From the walls, Skryre machines shrieked to life. Brass-limbed constructs hurled bolts of green fire into the mass of warspawn. One Skaven exploded mid-scream, his body ripped into glowing shards. Another turned inside out from the blast, bones twisting into meat. From above, Eshin assassins fell, claws out, blades dipped in nerve venom. One landed beside Skritch and lunged. He caught the assassin mid-strike and bit his throat open, spitting the chunk aside. "Betrayal," he roared. "Trap." Warp mutants screamed and surged forward, but they were met by a new horror. From the depths, Packlord Fesht gift came, stitched together from ogre, rat, and troll. It bellowed with 3 mouths and swung a club made from a screaming prisoner, still alive and caged in iron. It crushed 4 warspawn in a single blow. Skritch leapt upon it, drove the wolfang into its shoulder. The beast howled, grabbed him by the waist, and slammed him against a pillar. Once, twice, bones cracked, but he clung on. He bit into the beast's neck, tore out a fistful of flesh, and drove his claw into the exposed throat. It died screaming. Then came the smell. The air went sweet. A cloud rolled in, green, thick, alive. The plague. Rats screamed as their skin sloughed off. Eyes melted. Flesh bubbled. One clawed at his belly as his intestines burst from his gut and crawled away on their own. Skritch staggered. Burning, dying, changing. He laughed. Blood streamed from his mouth. Is that all? Is that your best? I am plague, I am war, I am wrath? He raised his blade, and the blade answered, cracking with green lightning. He charged. Behind him, his warspawn followed, dying, mutating, screaming. Ahead, the clans waited, but so did vengeance. And in the walls, the Hornrat watched. Chapter 12. Tunnel Wall at Blackcrack. The bastion bled. Stone groaned and screamed as war erupted from its core. Smoke choked the air, thick with the smell of burning fur, ruptured bile sacs, and boiling warp flesh. The walls ran wet with gore. Every corridor pulsed with death. Skritch Vilefang was in the thick of it. He crashed through a rusted barricade, eyes aflame, his claws soaked in traitor blood. The warp fang pulsed in his grip, twitching like a living thing, hungry for more. He was no longer a Skaven in body, not truly. His warped eye glowed bright enough to cast shadows, and his left arm, now fully changed, had fused with the bone of the blade, merging flesh and metal. He struck like a warp fire storm made flesh. The warspawn followed. Only half remained, maybe fewer. The newborns, his burrow-kin reborn, rushed forward with primal frenzy, fangs gnashing, claws flaying. Their birth defects had become weapons, arms like scythes, spines that lashed like whips, jaws unhinged to snap through armor. They flooded the halls, climbing walls, crawling through cracks, dying in waves, but taking 10 for every one. Slaughter, kill, no mercy, Skritch bellowed. Ahead, the first scryer firing line readied again, brass-clad engineers chanting over lightning guns as coils screamed with charge. The air crackled with impending death. Skritch threw himself into them. The first bolt struck him in the chest. It punched through meat, seared fur, split ribs. He staggered but didn't fall. His eye flared. He roared and lunged. He carved through the engineers, warfbang slicing through chest plates and skulls. One exploded, his power pack rupturing in a howl of electric flame. Another had his legs removed, then his head, then his arms. Skritch leaving him in twitching pieces. Behind him, his warspawn crashed into the second line. Teeth met throat, claws met spine. It was butchery. But more traps waited. To the left, a tunnel detonated, warp magma pouring in, melting 10 of his kin in seconds. They screamed as they burned, voices rising in harmony before fading into bubbling meat. To the right, the Eshin assassins struck again. They descended in silence, cloaks flaring, blades shimmering with venom. One landed on Skritch's back, plunging twin daggers into his spine. He twisted hard and flung the rat into the wall with a crunch. Another leapt at him, throat open in a hiss. Skritch caught her mid-air and bit her face off, teeth sinking into eye, cheek, and snout until nothing remained but cartilage. The third slit his thigh open, blood sprayed. He didn't flinch. He grabbed the assassin's arm and pulled. Ligaments tore, joints popped. The assassin shrieked before Skritch shoved his tail blade through his chest and left him pinned to the floor like trash. He staggered, bleeding, burning, covered in blood, not all of it his. "Still stand," he rasped, spitting teeth. "Still kill. Then he heard it. A bellow from deep below. The floors shook. Building stood, and the monster rose. It was one of Moulder's final gifts. A war beast crafted for the specific purpose of ending Skritch. A giant rat ogre stitched together from 10 others, each limb layered with iron and bone. Its head was a cage of tusks. Its spine jutted from its back like a row of jagged spears. Its heart pulsed visibly behind a warp-glass plate. It saw Skritch and charged. The ground quaked with every step. Skritch turned and met it. They collided like titans. The ogre swung its club fist. Skritch ducked under, slashed at the exposed leg. Sparks and flesh flew. The beast howled and grabbed him, lifting him high, smashing him down into the floor hard enough to crack the stone. Blood poured from his mouth, bones fractured, but his eye still burned. He drove the warfang upward, through the beast's jaw, out through its skull. The monster screamed, but did not die. It bit him, crunching down on his shoulder, ripping flesh and muscle. Skritch howled, and then laughed. He reached into the thing's exposed chest and grabbed its heart. It pulsed once, then he squeezed. The warp glass shattered in his hand, and the heart detonated. The rat ogre exploded from the inside, flesh and bone showering the chamber. Skritch was hurled back, slamming into a wall, a rib protruding from his side. He coughed blood. His lungs burned. His vision blurred. He stood. He turned to see his warspawn still fighting, still screaming. Bodies piled around them. Corpses twitched. Skritch raised the warpfang high, cracked, blackened, steaming with gore. "Not enough," he roared. "You think to stop me?" He pointed to the broken ceiling, where the path above twisted upward, toward freedom, toward the surface. "I rise, you all fall." The horned symbol of the rat burned in his eye. The bastion quaked, and the clans, watching from scrying globes and spy spells, trembled, because Skritch Vilefang was still alive, and winning. Chapter 13. Horned Ascension. The Blackstone split beneath his feet. Skritch Vilefang climbed. He limped, one arm shattered, ribs cracked like brittle bark, fur matted with the blood of his enemies and his own. Behind him his warband had dwindled to less than 20, fewer than 20 from hundreds. But they followed still, dragging claws and broken weapons, eyes fever-bright, singing with breathless devotion. Each step was agony, each heartbeat wrong. Slower, heavier, like the drum of something ancient stirring beneath his skin. His warpstone eye wept, glowing ichor, trailing behind him in molten droplets that hissed when they hit the ground. His mouth tasted of metal, rot, and prophecy. The ascent twisted. Stone turned to bone turned to glass. The path was no longer carved, it was grown, a spire of impossible material spiraling upward into a yawning void. No torch could burn here. The darkness swallowed fire like a starving god. And yet, light, green, pulsing, it bled from the top of the spire. The shrine, in a womb, the throne. He reached it at last, crawling the final steps on all fours, claws digging into flesh stone, teeth gnashing as visions clawed through his mind. He saw himself devoured. He saw himself exalted. He saw nothing and everything, and the rat god waiting. The shrine was shaped like a horned skull. No altar, no idols, only the stone, warpstone, a monolith of it, tall as a doom wheel, thrumming with dark energy, raw, uncut, singing in a voice that had no throat. It called to him, not in words, but need. He stepped forward. His followers whimpered behind him, some collapsing, some biting at their own flesh. One burst into green flame and didn't even scream. Skritch reached the monolith, placed his claw upon it. The world shattered. His mind split. He stood in a place beyond tunnels, beyond flesh, a realm of warp light and screaming thought. The warp itself, the horn rat's palace, a maze of bone and madness and hunger. Before him, it, the horned one, not one shape, all shapes, a shadow of teeth and tail, a god of disease and domination, chittering in endless harmony with itself. And it spoke. Skritch, son of ruin, claw of fire, you rise, climb higher. Yes, yes. Karaheshi, I serve, I slay, I offer all, Skritch howled, his voice dissolving into 1,000 echoes. Make me more, make me great. The god laughed, a sound like millions of teeth clattering in a metal bowl. You take, you don't beg. Good, good. From the dark, another shape stepped forward. Himself. It changed. Towering. Twisted. Crowned in horns of bone and brass. Skin flayed back to show rune-etched muscle. A Verminlord. Skritch fell to his knees before his own reflection. Is this me? Is this what I become? Not gift, the horned rat hissed. Not destiny. Trial, take the shape, or die in the climb. The Mara Skritch lunged. Reality snapped. Skritch's body spasmed as the monolith poured power into him. Warp energy surged down his throat, burning from within. His skin blistered, split, peeled, bones lengthened with cracking screams. His back tore open, half-formed wings bursting forth, raw and useless. His legs snapped backward, his spine popped in a dozen places. His tail doubled, flaying apart into a whip of muscle and barbed bone. He screamed, and screamed, and screamed. His claws fused with the warp fang. Not held. Became. His arm now ended in a jagged blade of warp-forged bone, veins pulsing with raw magic. Fur fell out in clumps. Flesh sloughed, and when it was done, he stood, shaking, smoking, breathing in ragged gasps. Still himself, not a Verminlord, not yet, but close, close. Behind him, one of his warband reached up to touch him in worship. Skritch turned, and with a single swing of his new monstrous blade, cut him in half. The corpse fell in 2 wet thumps. The others dropped to their knees. He stepped onto the corpse, raised the warp fang, and screamed, I am the claw god's fag. The shrine shook to raise Stoneblade. And in the warp, the horned rat chuckled, not pleased, but interested. Chapter 14. Home, but not safe. The tunnels narrowed. The ceiling dropped so low that Skritch Vilefang had to stoop, though his newly warped spine refused to bend cleanly. Every step was a scraping agony of bone against stone, his fused claw blade dragging gouges through the walls. His breath hissed through a cracked snout, carrying the stench of warp rot and burned flesh. Behind him, a handful of survivors limped and twitched, what remained of his warband. Most were less than whole. One dragged his lower jaw behind him like a tail. Another had no eyes, only sockets leaking green mist. They didn't speak. They couldn't. They followed because their minds had cracked wide open, and inside was only one name, one idea. Skritch, Skritch, Skritch. He had climbed beyond them now, above them. The flesh that hung from his limbs was only a suggestion of mortality. The warpstone eye glowed like a star eating itself from within. His tail split at the tip, fanning into 3 razor-fanged tendrils that writhed of their own accord. Had the scent of home. Clock and burrows. It waited, festering with life he once ruled. The warrens squatted deep in the dark like a cyst, filled with the same cowards and backbiters who once cast him out. He could feel them now, twitching in their nests, squabbling over scraps, thinking themselves safe. He stepped from the narrow crawl space into a chamber carved by familiar hands. The scent struck first: musk, urine, old rot, and the oily tang of iron. Then came the noise: claws on stone, distant chittering, the slop of meat being mashed in feeding pits. His lip peeled back into a snarl. Home. He didn't snake. He munched. The halls fell silent as he passed. Slaves cowered, warriors froze. One trembled, reached for a rust blade, and Skritch's tail split him from groin to gullet before he made a sound. Entrails slapped the floor in steaming ropes. The rest turned and ran. The alarm began. Gongs clanged, screeches echoed. The clocken stirred. Warlords, priests, seers, pretenders. Skritch climbed the spine of the burrow like a fire in a bone pipe, every level above him choking with more rats. Some tried to stand, some tried to flee. All died. He butchered a squad of sentries with one sweep of his fused blade arm, their blood painting the walls in arcs of pulsing red. A chieftain flung a warp-fire bomb. Skritch caught it mid-air and bit into it. The explosion ripped through his jaw, peeling skin, but his eye flared, and the wound closed in seconds. He laughed, the sound deep, ragged, inhuman. I return, yes, yes, I take claim, no more exile, no more fall fail. He reached the throne chamber, the great nest cavern, high-ceilinged, dome-shaped, rimmed with cages full of slaves and meat stock. At the center, atop a pile of warped brass and bone, sat warlord Krizik Gnawjaw, self-crowned ruler in Skritch's absence. Krizik wore a patchwork cloak made from skinned rats and warp hide. His face was etched with self-made scars, and in his claw was a warp maul still dripping from its last execution. He stood when Skritch entered. "You died I already, mad thinker," Krizik sneered, voice trembling behind the arrogance. "You not rule now. You Orod." Skritch walked forward. The crowd of warriors flanking Krizik hesitated. Their whiskers twitched, their tails drooped, because the thing that entered the chamber was not the Skritch they remembered. He was taller now, hunched beneath twisted hornbutts that cracked through his skull. His muscles pulsed with unnatural rhythm. His chest glowed faintly from the inside, and every breath he took shimmered the air with heat. Krizik took a step back. "You are nothing. A failure. A cursed thing." Skritch's voice came as a whisper. "I'm what you fear to become." And then he moved. Too fast. The warp fang snapped through the air like lightning made of bone and fury. Krizik raised the warp maul just in time to block, and it shattered, shards slicing into his snout and neck. Blood sprayed across the throne. Skritch slammed into him. They hit the floor. Krizik clawed and screamed, bit, headbutted. He raked Skritch's face and kicked at his guts. Skritch didn't flinch. He bit into Krizik's neck, tore through cartilage, and pulled until the windpipe came free in a gory spiral. Krizik thrashed, then stopped. Skritch stood, lifted the corpse by the tail. "Behold," he roared, holding it aloft. "False warlord, weak thing, useless." He slammed the corpse down onto the throne, then sat on it. Heavy, bleeding, eyes blazing, his tail wrapped around the corpse like a leash. "You serve me now," he hissed, "or you feed the pit." The crowd fell silent. One by one the clocken bowed, trembling. Some prostrated themselves so hard their claws snapped against the stone. Skritch exhaled through cracked lips, black ichor dribbling down his chin. "Good, good," he rasped. "Now, prepare. I march again, soon." His gaze turned upward, to the ceiling of the chamber, where the rock thinned, where the surface waited. Let the world know, let it fear, the Claw Lord rises. And somewhere deep in the warp, the horn rat smiled, and waited. Chapter 15. Verminlord in Waiting. The surface was close. The air had changed. No longer the thick, fetid breath of the Under-Empire, but something colder, thinner, laced with minerals and ancient ash, with wind that had never touched fur or fang. Skritch Vilefang stood on a jagged platform of blackened stone, carved from a collapsed tunnel leading upward into a shaft of darkness that bled light. Sunlight. Distant, faint, but real. The warlord inhaled. His lungs rattled, filled with warped tissue and ambition. His flesh no longer clung to its original shape. The transformation had slowed but not stopped. His back was hunched with jagged bone, his shoulders crowned with ridges that pulsed in time with his heartbeat. His eye, his true eye, burned so brightly now that it left glowing scars on whatever it looked at for too long. And behind him the Clocken knelt, an army of freaks and fanatics. Warp-spawn stitched veterans, plague-touched killers. Their bodies bore the marks of battle and mutation alike. Limbs too long, eyes too many, armor fused to flesh, tails sharpened to points. And every single one of them had carved the same rune into their own skin. He turned to them now. "I brought you through fire, through war, through death. I rose clawed, through betrayal, rot, and godfangs. I bled, I changed, I broke." His voice echoed, not loud, but heavy, soaked in divine resonance. The very walls seemed to lean in to hear. "You followed. You obeyed. Now you see." He raised the warfang, no longer metal, no longer a weapon, now a limb, a part of him. It twitched like it remembered every death it had ever delivered. The horde chittered in response. Some wept, some screamed, some beat their heads on the stone until blood pooled beneath them. I do not beg. I do not kneel. I do not wait. I take. I claim. And I tell you now, he pointed to the ceiling, to the earth above, to the world we were denied, the Skyrim, the meat nations, the pale things that live in the light and think they are safe. He bared his fangs. "We will burn them." The crowd erupted, screeching, chanting, tearing at their own fur in ecstasy. Scratch, scritch. Above them, the tunnel cracked. Sunlight speared through, cutting a shaft of gold through the dark. Skritch stepped into it and screamed. Smoke poured from his body, steam hissed from his open wounds, his skin blistered. He howled in agony but stood firm. The sun was not for Skaven. It was poison, fire, judgment. And still, he held his ground, to begin the journey back down to the Aleppo. "I am the unburnt flesh," he snarled. "The claw that reaches up. The god-blooded. The Verminlord in waiting." He sank to his knees, not in weakness, but in ritual. His tail lashed the stone, carving circles of power. Warp energy surged from him in ripples of distortion. The sun above dimmed, not because it waned, but because he stole its light. Then darkness again. The hole sealed itself in crumbling rock, the shaft collapsed, and the Clocken cheered. Later, in the depths of the warren, Skritch sat upon his new throne. It was built not of wood or iron, but of bones. The bones of his enemies, his allies, his betrayers. Each rib and femur was carved with runes, etched by hand into every surface. Blood oozed from the joints. The throne breathed. He sat still for hours, eyes shut. The horned rat spoke no words. But he was there, watching, smiling, judging. Not yet. Skritch was not yet the thing he would become. Not yet claws made God. Not yet the scream at the end of the world. But soon, very, very soon, he opened his eye. It burned bright, and in the deep tunnels of the Under-Empire, where old gods stirred and war was always near, every Skaven who heard the name Skritch Vilefang, from the inside out, trembled.